everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today called Next Normal Home. My name is Katie Hunt, and I'm the telecommunications analyst at Orange Silicon Valley. I'll be leading our session today along with guest speaker, Dr. Robin Beers. Before we get started, let me just set the scene. Our webinar today is the latest in a 20-part series called Business Resilience in All Times. Orange has organized these webinars to provide information and analysis to support business leaders through the coronavirus pandemic and beyond. Today's session is a look into the domain of the home in the next normal. Our goal is to provide a Silicon Valley perspective on major societal changes we see in the digitally accelerated world after the pandemic. A little bit about Orange Silicon Valley. Orange Silicon Valley has been engaging in the Silicon Valley ecosystem for 20 years through investments, strategy, and technological innovation, with a team of 45 subject matter experts focusing on 17 areas of innovation. Today's topic is Next Normal Home, and we'll be looking at how the home has become the nexus of all major activities as we shelter in place during the pandemic. We expect that many of these changes will continue even when we have COVID-19 behind us. Joining me today is Dr. Robin Beers, who will provide insights on how design serves as a vehicle for problem solving. Robin is Senior Vice President, Digital Solutions for Business, and leads customer insights and experience design at Wells Fargo. Robin has also looked at systemic and structural inequities through the lens of design and innovation. I'd also like to introduce my colleague, Will Barkas, who is a principal here at Orange Silicon Valley. Will is going to help out with Q&A throughout the session. You can enter your questions on the right with your first name automatically appearing in the chat section on the right side of your screen. Or if you prefer a more private setting, you can use the questions area where you can anonymously submit questions, and only Robin, Will, and I will be able to see your comments. So let's get started. Here's the format for our discussion, which will last about 45 minutes. I'll start with an overview of the next normal home, which will include how basic home design has been impacted by the pandemic. We'll also consider these changes through a historical lens. We'll then shift to the many overlapping spheres of the home, which include but aren't limited to work, education, entertainment, health, and exercise. And then we'll have a presentation on design from Dr. Robin Beers. At that point, we'll move to a fireside chat, and we welcome your questions from the audience, so please submit them. We also have a few polls that we're going to intersperse through the presentation, and I think we'll just start with one poll question now. Kathy, can you put up the first poll question? It's regarding where are we working right now? So we'll just pause for a second for the poll to appear. You'll see the poll on the right under the poll tab. So please submit your poll answers when you have a chance. It'd be interesting to see where people are working these days, at home, at the office, or the hybrid model, both home and office. The home has taken on a new meaning during the pandemic, and people have new responsibilities. Many people are working from home, and they're also their children's teachers. This has been a huge change, and it's reflected in every aspect of our lives. The image on the right is of the new at-home section of the New York Times, which replaced the travel section. Its tagline is, quote, offering our best suggestions for how to live a full and connected life during the pandemic at home. We can't go anywhere right now, so we must create a bigger life at home. And it is absolutely critical to note that how the home works or doesn't work for us during the pandemic has a lot to do with class economics, geography, and access to technology. So let's get started. As Steve Jobs said, design is not just what it looks like and feels like, design is how it works. We've seen throughout history how significant events, such as the outbreak of disease, can alter how we live. Tuberculosis was one of the early 20th century's most pressing health concerns. Designing space to promote treatment and recovery from the disease helped to shape modernism, which featured airy and clean spaces. The picture on the right is of a cure cottage in North Dakota. It was believed that fresh air was critical for the recovery from TB, and as you can see, the sick are lined up in beds outside. Now, the quarantine required for COVID-19 has led to a more defensive way of life where there are zones of socially distanced safety. Here's a photo of New York City in 1915. When tuberculosis made it too dangerous to be inside, this classroom was moved to a ferry. And some policymakers now are suggesting that we should make use of history to navigate the current pandemic. Today with COVID, we're seeing people put a premium on private outdoor space. This photo is from a backyard of a home in the Castro neighborhood of San Francisco. People are looking for spaces where the whole family can work and study and have a place to unwind and play. They're looking for the perfect mix of private indoor and outdoor space. Pre-COVID, these details could have been compensated for with a coffee shop or a park or some other place, but now the home must serve multiple purposes. We're also seeing a bigger push for larger accommodation. In some cases, away from cities where property prices remain high. This movement away from city centers could potentially mark a reverse of a century-long trend toward greater urbanization. However, it should be noted that this push for bigger and better space is more realistic in some areas than others. And also cities are expected to remain a draw for many, especially the young, despite the current dangers of higher density living. And people are finding workarounds for a long-term work from home situation. People are finding ways to modify and create new space. The company Studio Shed creates customizable and prefabricated sheds and ships them directly to your door. This photo on the right depicts a Bay Area family that bought a home office shed, allowing flexibility for work and family life. Since many people are working from home indefinitely, this is one way to adapt the home to new needs. And you can see from the quote, the shed has provided flexibility for the family, the ability to make calls late at night or early in the morning without disturbing their toddler. And that's very important. One issue that has come up through this period of sheltering in place is the question of how to maintain community. The photo on the right from Time Magazine, the photo on the slide from Time Magazine depicts a Louisiana family taking some space from each other while remaining physically distanced from others. We know that the mandated isolation imposed with COVID-19 is making the problem of loneliness much worse, which is a growing concern. Moving forward, the pandemic is expected to permanently alter home design. Multi-use living spaces will be necessary as people conduct much of their lives at home. Modularity is an option for smaller spaces. The picture on the left is of an extended family of 12 members that collaborated with an architecture firm to design an inclusive family home for 3 generations. As we continue to deal with COVID-19, the smart home concept may increasingly focus on features such as cost and security, cost efficiency and security. Security is important as people seek to protect their space from outsiders and the virus, and cost comes into play as the economy moves into a recessionary environment. We may also see features like home automation and IoT become more important. Smart speakers and light bulbs may be used to help set different scenes in the home from work to entertainment. And operators may look to emphasize DIY or do-it-yourself remote monitoring and control products, which have the advantage during COVID-19 as technicians don't need to enter the home to set them up. So that's a very key option to have. Smart home devices that reduce the need for direct physical interaction, such as video doorbells, may also see more interest. And money-saving devices such as smart thermostats may also be more relevant during the downturn. While smart home device sales in 2020 have not been as robust as previously expected, more consumers are finding value in connected products that can deliver convenience, energy efficiency, greater security, as well as health and wellness. And the pandemic has also highlighted one aspect of smart city technologies for many businesses and agencies, which is the rethinking of how connected buildings should be built going forward. IoT-based technologies can be employed to use remotely operated sensors, which could help buildings maintain satisfactory levels of air quality and sanitation. And these are key considerations as offices and shops reopen. Now let's look at the state of work. The global crisis has accelerated a change that was coming, working from home or working from anywhere. About 56% of the US workforce holds a job that is at least partially compatible with remote work. During the pandemic, it's estimated that the number of workers doing their jobs from home ranges from 1/3 to nearly 1/2. Still, about half of working Americans cannot do their jobs remotely. And according to a 2016 analysis by Global Workplace Analytics, the typical telecommuter these days is college educated, 45 years or older, earns an annual salary of $58,000, and works for a company of at least 100 employees. Working parents are also under additional strain with COVID. This graphic is from a recent story in the New York Times. In the COVID-19 economy, you can have a kid or a job, but you can't have both. We've seen the COVID health crisis trigger a serious economic crisis. This includes incalculable losses for professional adults, especially women, due to their increasing responsibilities at home. Pre-pandemic, women spent about 13 hours more than men every week on unpaid care and housework. This has only increased with COVID, and we're seeing an increasing opportunity cost where women are missing out on professional development and risk being pushed out of the labor force. The longer the pandemic goes on, the worse damage it will inflict on the lives of women, children, people of color, and the poor. This massive work from home experiment is already changing long-standing attitudes around remote work. So let's briefly pause for our second poll question, which is regarding whether you plan to return to the office. Again, you can find the poll under the poll tabs on the right side of your screen. And please feel free to submit an answer. We're curious about what's happening with people. Okay, great. That is interesting. Moving on. Many articles have been written about the future of the office. We've seen companies like Twitter and Square adopt permanent work from home policies. Facebook made news when it announced that about half of its workforce would work from home by 2030. And Google announced just this week that it plans to that it will keep its employees home until at least next July. It's the first major US corporation to formalize such an extended timetable. This move will affect nearly 200 of the roughly 200,000 full-time and contracted employees at Google's parent company, Alphabet. These tech bellwethers may be pioneering a new standard of working from anywhere. And even if companies don't go as far as Facebook and Twitter and Google, work is expected to remain distributed post-COVID. Nearly 1 in 5 CFOs surveyed in late March said they plan to keep at least 20% of their workforce working remotely to cut costs. This projection was echoed by Global Workplace Analytics, which estimated that 25 to 30% of the workforce will be working for multiple days of the week by the end of 2021. And previously, this is interesting, the primary driver of work from home programs had been to attract and retain talent, but during the last recession, it became about saving money. Company leaders have found that they can cut costs by reducing their real estate footprint. As sheltering in place has gone from weeks to months, we have seen how critical it is to have a strong internet connection. So we're moving on to, the remote education and the digital divide. It is critical to have a strong internet connection. With limited face-to-face interaction, life is lived online. As you can see from the chart on the left from Pew Research, roughly half of adults say the internet has been essential to them during the coronavirus outbreak, but majorities do not think it is the government's responsibility to ensure connectivity for all. And we know it's estimated that nearly 43 million Americans lack high-speed internet access. The chart on the left gives state-by-state data on the estimated number of people that without fixed broadband access in 2020. As you can see, Texas more than 4 million, California more than 2 million, and so forth. And this disparity hits lower income people harder. More than 22% of people in lower income brackets still do not have sufficient internet connections for work and school. And some of this is because the prices of basic broadband, TV, and phone packages are higher in the US than the rest of the world. And the number of children who need to do remote learning is staggering. During last spring, there were more than 55 million students impacted by school closures. And it looks like the majority of California students will be starting the new year online only, with recent announcements from Los Angeles, San Diego, and San Francisco counties that the children will be doing remote education. So this problem is not going away. Stepping back for a broader perspective on COVID, the pandemic has disproportionately impacted people of color, as you can see from the chart on the left. According to Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot, Chicago's black residents make up less than 30% of the city's population, but they account for 72% of the deaths from COVID. Broad shelter-in-place directives have highlighted the digital divide, which has disproportionately impacted people of color. Nearly half of Americans without at-home internet are in Black and Latino households. And here's a look at how the digital divide in California has hit certain demographic groups harder. Almost 3/4 of California households have broadband at home. And you can see where the numbers fall from there, with African Americans at 67%, the rural demographic at 59%, low income at 55%. In contrast, the San Francisco Bay Area has some of the best broadband availability, with more than 80% of households enjoying top-tier internet speeds. Meanwhile, about 27% of school-aged children in California, or about 1.7 million children, did not have broadband connections in 2017, according to the Public Policy Institute of California. And although California has made some progress in closing the digital divide, internet access at home is still a challenge. In April, California Governor Gavin Newsom announced the donation of 70,000 laptops and tablet-type devices, or money towards them, for the states to distribute to students who may not have access to computers at home. We're seeing how the digital divide is leading to lasting inequality. Nearly 70% of teachers assign homework that requires broadband access, and that's according to the FCC. As the Wall Street Journal story reported, that's pictured here, prolonged remote learning is widening the education gap. Preliminary research suggests students nationwide will return to school in the fall with roughly 70% of learning gains in reading relative to a typical school year, and less than 50% in math. And that's based on a study by an Oregon-based nonprofit education services firm. And that firm also said it expects greater learning loss for minority and low-income children who have less access to technology and whose families are more likely to be impacted by the economic downturn. A lack of connectivity in rural America has been a longstanding issue. As you can see, this chart highlights how rural America still has significantly less connectivity compared with suburban and urban regions. The FCC has looked to incentivize telcos to build out their networks, but the limited potential for profitability has hindered expansion. The US House recently approved a $1.5 trillion infrastructure bill that includes roughly $100 billion for bringing broadband to underserved areas, including rural. That bill is unlikely to pass the Senate, but the broadband amendment appears to have greater bipartisan support. While we're working and learning at home, we're also looking for downtime and entertainment. The hashtag #PlayApartTogether has come to signify what community means during the pandemic. The places where we are socializing these days are increasingly online. We're looking for always open, COVID immune digital spaces. In this light, we're seeing an explosion of online gaming. We're also seeing a greater embrace of the so-called Metaverse, alternate digital realities where people work, play, and socialize. In fact, we expect one of the most significant impacts of the pandemic to be how it has helped to destigmatize virtual existence. We're also looking to socialize through video apps like House Party, which allows group chat and games. Here we have some images of House Party on the left. The app has seen a surge of signups during the lockdown as online games have become the new social media. Similarly, Discord, the free chat app, has become a huge favorite of Generation Z. It has more than 250 million registered users, and that's up from 130 million 1 year ago. It says that there are 850 million messages exchanged on its platform daily. In June, Discord announced a new funding round of 100 million at a reported valuation of 3.5 billion. The company says it wants to be more than just a place for gamers and now is billing itself as a sort of a Slack for users' social lives. And on the far right, online game platform Roblox announced this week it has more than 150 million monthly active users. And that's up from 115 million announced in February before the US's shelter in place went into effect. The company also says its developer community is on pace to earn over $250 million this year, and that's up from $110 million they earned last year. We're also seeing parents hosting their children's birthday parties on the Roblox sites, as well as other events that would normally be held in person. During the pandemic, we've seen virtual concert live streams gain popularity. John Legend held his first virtual concert performing songs from his new album. This event was hosted by social VR music venue Wave, and we expect more of these events as the pandemic continues. Likewise, we are seeing new venues for experiences, such as the Travis Scott concert held on Fortnite. Scott's event in April was viewed live by more than 12 million people. The Travis Scott concert was another example of how Fortnite has evolved into a sort of a social square. And quoting venture capitalist Matthew Ball, Fortnite is rapidly becoming a medium through which other brands, IP, and stories express themselves. And as we know, the home is the center of many other activities, including telehealth and exercise. Another trend occurring during the pandemic has been the rise of telehealth services as people stay away from medical offices and hospitals. Post-COVID, at-home consultations with both general practitioners and specialists are likely to become more common. One issue that remains critical is the protection of medical data. We expect to see an influx of companies building reliable software to preserve privacy. Startups in the telemedicine space are also drawing interest. Telehealth provider Doctor On Demand announced a $75 million Series D funding round in July. The company said it has seen usage rise 139% this year due to COVID-19 screenings and other health issues. And Doctor On Demand's investors include Andreessen Horowitz, Goldman Sachs, and Google Ventures. Likewise, the fitness at home is seen as a safer option than gyms at this time. With gyms closed, companies that sell a mix of hardware and software subscription services for digital classes are seeing an uptick in interest. Content for these platforms is expected to lead to a new marketplace for trainers, digital experiences such as VR, and personalized coaching. Connected fitness companies like Peloton are seeing an explosion of popularity despite their high price point. In June, retailer Lululemon agreed to acquire Mirror, which is the image on the slide, for $500 million. The retailer is expected to feature these Mirror exercise devices in its stores. Mirror offers live classes through its wall-mounted Mirror device, in addition to on-demand workouts and one-on-one personal training sessions. The Mirror retails for nearly $1,500, and subscribers pay $39 per month to stream their classes. Similarly, Hydro, a maker of connected rowing machines that retail for nearly $2,200, raised $25 million in June. The Massachusetts-based startup has seen sales jump by 400% during the pandemic. Hydro's tagline is "the feel of the river, the power of the team, and the comfort of your home." And finally, Zwift is a provider of virtual training for running and cyclists, has more than 2.4 million accounts. It has thrived in the world of the lockdown. It says blending the fun of video games with the intensity of serious training. And it has also indicated that it may follow Peloton with an IPO. And that's it for the overview. And now we'll move on to a presentation on design from Dr. Robin Beers. Hi, Robin.
Hey.
Perfect.
I'm off mute. I did it. I did it. Thank you. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
I just can't believe how comprehensive it was.
Well, there's a lot going on. The home is a complicated place with a lot of different things going on, right?
Yeah,
especially
absolutely.
These days. Yeah,
absolutely. Great. Should we jump right in?
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. So, thanks for having me. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We're going to talk a little bit now about how design relates to these issues. At its core, design is a problem-solving methodology, and design offers us structured methodology, process to navigate a path forward, especially in uncertain and ambiguous times. So design methods help us to learn, help us to solve problems, and get to root causes. So first, let's start with a definition of design. And this is from Laura Lee Albin, who founded the Sea Change Design Institute. And she defines design as the conscious planning and meaningful action that creates relationship with humanity, nature, spirit, and time. And I just let that definition wash over you for a moment. I just really think it's nice to be able to think about these pieces of conscious planning and then taking meaningful action. So one thing about design that I think is really important is that the processes of how we design our lives, our work, our policies are agnostic. We can apply the methodology of design to any of these contexts, not just spaces, products, and services. The first kind of methodology or process I'm going to talk about, I'm just going to talk about two, but one is problem framing versus problem solving. So much in our lives has changed due to COVID, and a lot of things are, out of our control. But it's important to, say if we want to make some improvements to our lives, to our home life, to look at what improvements we want to make and really hone in on what is the problem that we are trying to solve. A lot of times we get to solving problems before we've properly spent the time in conscious planning to frame the correct problem. So this is a technique that I use for problem framing. And you can do this on your own. You could do it in collaboration with a spouse, workmates, whatever. But you take the issue. Say the issue is, I need to have more activity in my life. I used to walk back and forth to the ferry and to my office and so forth, and now I'm just sitting all the time. So I might write out 40 words, you don't have to count them, obviously, about what the situation is, I'm not getting enough activity, et cetera, et cetera. And then you look at it again and you whittle that down to 20 words, and then 10 words, and then 5 words. And it really helps you to hone in on what is the root cause or what is the root issue that I'm trying to solve for. And this, process of concision, making things more and more precise, helps you to really narrow in on the parts you can control and the parts that are really important about the problem you're trying to solve. The second technique from design that you can apply to home life, work life, is around going wide first. And this is called the concept of divergence. And then you narrow in later and prune your ideas, and that is called convergence. Sometimes people call this flare and focus. So I think this is a great one to do with families, especially, if there are issues cropping up like there are in my house around, too much screen time or not enough fun family time. And you can, just sit together and take 5 minutes of silence where everybody just to themselves writes down as many ideas, preferably on a Post-it note, one idea per Post-it note. Excuse me. Write down as many ideas, excuse me, as possible. And then after the 5 minutes has passed, start to share those ideas and cluster those ideas into groups. And you'll see probably, the ideas that my 10-year-old son would come up with would be different than my husband or myself or whatever. And this is a very democratic process for problem solving that gives voice to everybody at the table and helps you to see where there are similar ideas and different ideas. And then you can start grouping those and start, prioritizing them even, which ones are the most important, which ones are the easiest to implement, which ones are harder, and that kind of thing. So, design techniques just help you to navigate uncertainty. And we have a lot of that in our lives these days. And really helps you to look at things from a systems perspective. So hopefully that's been helpful. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, Katie, as we go into dialogue.
Yeah, thank you so much, Robin. I love the idea of having a process like design to use when things are uncertain, to rely on a process to address and frame problems and to solve them. I think it's such an interesting idea because I had always thought of design more in limited terms around, structures, but I love the idea of framing problems and I love the 40-20-10-5 rule. I even started, using some problems just to see how I could do it, because the idea of simplifying and putting it into concise 5 terms, it really helps to crystallize what it is we're talking about. So I think that's such an interesting idea. So what I'd like to do before we really launch into our fireside chat is our third poll question, which you should see up on the right under the poll tab. And so go ahead and answer it, and I'm answering it as well. And I realize so now I see the results of the other ones, which I didn't see earlier. So for our first 2 poll questions, where are you working from home now? 86% of people are working from home and 14% are hybrid model, both home and office. And that to me is not surprising, right? Given what's going on with shelter in place. Robin, you let me know if you think it's surprising, but do you plan? Yeah.
No, I didn't think it was surprising at all. What I found surprising was the next poll question.
Yes.
And I think it really speaks to the uncertainty that we're all living in.
Yes.
30% of us don't know whether we're returning to our office.
Now that really struck me as well, because that really is 30% is a sizable chunk of us who are don't have a clear visibility into the future. And that's a real challenge for people, Yeah. That really struck me as well, that number. And then, okay, so the results for our final one, are you caring for family members now? If so, please check. 10% have children 5 years and under, 40% children 5 to 10, children 11 to 18 years old, 10%, and parents and seniors, 40%. That's a lot of caretaking. There's some significant caretaking responsibilities. So that's something important to consider. Anyway, so moving into our fireside chat. So Robin and I are going to talk a bit, and we would love to hear some questions from the audience, so please keep submitting them. The first one I wanted to just ask you about, Robin, is we're both mothers, and we've talked about the challenges of remote education and working at home. And one phenomenon I'm seeing a lot of is these so-called pandemic pods or learning pods, where you group children together and then you match them with a tutor or another person to help them supervise their studies. And the benefits of that are obvious, like stability and structure and, and a chance for them to socialize and be around other children, which is very important. But a lot of criticisms have come up as well, because they seem to they're going to be expensive. And so they're going to be available to families of privilege. And then you also risk the exclusionary aspect, which is, if children aren't invited to join a pod and they feel excluded. And how do parents reconcile this? I know this is an unanswerable question, but it's like, how are we supposed to do our jobs and take care of it's very difficult. Yeah.
It's definitely difficult. And, I've been noticing on, local social networking groups, somebody will post, I'm available, I'm an educator, I'm available to work with pods. And that person is like snatched up immediately. Yeah. And there's so much uncertainty about, even how to form a pod and how to make in and of itself safe. A lot of parents are not comfortable with in-person yet, and we don't know who our children's teachers are, and so does it make sense to have these 4 kids together if they're in disparate classes? And I think the equity issue is a really big one. And what are we willing to do as a community to help include children who might otherwise not be included because their families can't afford it, or they don't have access, et cetera. And that's also where I think conscious planning and meaningful action comes into play, where we want to make sure that the future that we are designing is the future that we want. And looking at things systemically from an individual, a community, and a societal lens.
Yeah, and it helps to have the design, the paradigm that you mentioned, just to solve these are big problems and big issues. It's interesting. I did see the Oakland Unified School District said they will not be considering the pods when they make the classes, because I know parents have come to the schools and said, can you put these same kids into a class together so that they could be the learning pod? And the school district said, we're not going to participate in that. So that's interesting. Yeah.
That is interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then my next question for you is just what's one thing that you can do to improve your home life right now? What do you?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. I think, we've all been doing a lot of different things, gardening, making bread, cooking a lot and that kind of thing. I think the number one thing that I personally need to do is to get outside more. And that's not easy, with a laptop and the glare of the sun and whatever, but just really taking time to have fresh air and to get outside and to really prioritize that and put that into my day, even put it into my calendar.
Absolutely. Yeah, I find that being in nature really helps to manage stress. It seems to be a really critical, Muir Woods is a natural stress reliever. But for me, thinking about it, I've been trying to come to terms with the idea that remote education and working from home are going to be going on for a while, and trying to actively make changes at home that I think might help this. I think for me, it will be more structured days depending on around learning and working. But you have to kind of consciously do it. And I also think you have to separate, work time and family time or downtime. And I think that's hard to do when you're always in the same spot all day long. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So then what's one area of home life you might try to redesign? This is it's kind of on a similar idea. Do you have any thoughts about that, or?
I think the area that I would personally really want to redesign is, and I think this probably was before the pandemic as well, is really creating routines and rituals around family time together. Having a game night, having a movie night. It's really hard though when you have to get other people to buy into it.
Oh yeah, exactly. There's not always that's a challenge. I know, and I love how you were talking earlier a little bit about getting everybody's input on decisions and not just the adults in the room or whatever. No, I think that's a great idea. Yeah, I've been thinking a little bit about the idea that outdoors seems better than indoors for COVID. So how do we live more outdoors? And I've been thinking kind of forward to the fall and the winter, like the holiday, like Thanksgiving. Like, can we do Thanksgiving outside? Can I see my parents? How do we make that work? And I think if you thinking about living more outside for a year and how we can make that work, it's a challenge, but it's I don't want to be cut off from people either. I think it's important that we remain social with people that we care about, our friends and our family. So yeah, it's a challenge though. And I guess so. Then our hope question is: in the midst of all this chaos and turmoil, what's giving you hope these days?
Yeah, that I love that question. I think hope is so important, and you know, these are really scary times, and so hope is kind of next door to gratitude. You know, it's like, what are we grateful for? What can we, still appreciate? And you know, for me, I think that the silver lining and what gives me hope is that people are really recognizing their interdependence. And with the social equality protests against racism that we've seen, I don't know if that would have happened if people weren't already so tuned in to our mutual vulnerability and our interdependence.
Yeah, that's a great point. I agree with you. That's a great point. Yeah, for me, I've been thinking, a lot of conversations I have with people are about like that we're getting a reset or we're getting a pause, and we have to use that time. We can use that time to examine our relationships with people and, how we treat the environment. It's just, if we get a pause, and it's an opportunity that, hopefully won't come around again in terms of a pandemic, but just an opportunity to improve things that need improvement. And we've seen, even like, I think about with the environment, we've seen even how the pollution was cut down just by people being at home. So we can make changes in our environment and in society, but I think it's just taking the time to do it and to thoughtfully, be mindful of it.
Don't go back.
Exactly. Great point. Yeah.
Will, looks like we have a lot of really great.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's take some questions. Thanks for those talks. Those are really excellent. First question, I think, is a kind of a practical one. Do you see companies making significant changes to work-life flexibility or other ways to support parenting?
I could jump in if you'd like. I think they are, because I think they're seeing that it works. I think that companies that may have been reluctant to have work from home policies have had it forced on them in this massive scale. And I think they found that productivity has remained high or has been higher than even before. And I think that having that evidence will allow them to make policies going forward that support working parents. But it's a tricky question for sure. But I think this is it's providing a ton of evidence, I think, that it works.
Obviously, Robin, if you want to jump into, let me know. Another question, because we're running a little short on time. This is a two-parter. So, could COVID coalesce the needs of parents across class? For instance, many of the wealthy are not used to having normal constraints on their options. And part two is the people that we work with, or that I work with, this person's case, who are most devastated by the lack of childcare are those that make the most money. So my friends at Google with children, are really feeling devastated by lack of control. Any thoughts on the class? We talked about it a little bit.
Yeah. I think what the question poser is saying, like, could there be some sort of mutual benefit to parents with a lot of means teaming up with parents who don't have a lot of means? We're probably similar in the fact that we're working a lot, and don't have that flexibility that maybe folks in the middle do. I really like that idea. I think maybe a challenge would be, do we live in the same places?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Okay. So here's a question. Maybe I don't know if we have time for another one or two before we need to wrap. But clearly, our work-life home balance has been radically changed due to the pandemic. Talk about teleworking, teleschool, all the other areas you described. Are there opportunities for improving our balance, or like maybe using design, to like make things actually better and establish a new balance?
Yeah. Sorry, I got a little bit distracted by another question because I'm reading. Yeah.
You feel we can change. We can also, I guess the question is, are there opportunities to not just negatively impact our lives here, but to improve our balance with our family, with our work? And
I think Katie was just alluding to that in her comments earlier. I believe that we do need to redesign what we want our world and our lives to look like going forward. We've all been looking at, well, what are the silver linings here? And those include, improvements to our environment, which is a critical issue, as well as our relationships and home life. So I do think we need to be very conscious about our language, even like, well, when things go back to normal, it's like, do we really want what that normal was? Yeah. And the question I got distracted with is really fascinating. Do you think children will have any specific social skills divergence from prior generations based on social distancing and lack of physical interaction? Oh, I have no idea, but isn't that just like top of mind for any parent? It's like, what is this doing to our kids? And, I know I'm allowing a lot more screen time, video game time, because that's where my son interacts. But it's not the same as, playing a season of baseball.
No, they need other children. I mean, that's how they learn. It's almost more important than their academics, depending on the age, but I think it's very important. We need to learn how to be people. Yeah.
Right. So it's a great question.
There are a couple more. I think maybe one quick one, maybe this is more for Katie, is, what are the new connectivity and service requirements for working from anywhere? Or working from home?
So one thing we did at Orange Silicon Valley, we looked at networks and operators and how the pandemic was stressing them. And we didn't see any major outages, even considering the load of people now working from home. So we're seeing operators right now. One factor that's come into play is this recessionary environment. So in terms of telco, we're seeing a shift to prepaid services as people lose their jobs. But in terms of connectivity, there hasn't been, I think that the telcos are starting to look into maybe faster services, more data services, and maybe in offerings that are tailor-made for working from home. I know Comcast has certain kind of premium home business packages for their internet service, but they've been a little bit slower to adapt. But one major thing is that there haven't been outages, and that was something that was expected early on. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we're out of time for Q&A, but thank you both.
Thank you, Robin.
Yeah, thank you. Great questions.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for the questions. Yeah. Okay. And then just before we close, I'd like to highlight a few key points from our webinar. As we discussed, the home sits at the intersection of many spheres, including work, education, and entertainment. And other spheres, including health and exercise, will become more central to the home experience. The pandemic is forcing a reconsideration of our physical spaces. History, of course, can be a guideline to understanding how these changes are underway. We expect some form of work from home to continue for many post-pandemic as the workforce becomes increasingly distributed. And shelter in place and the challenges of remote learning have renewed the urgency around the significant problem of the digital divide. And to reiterate, Robin, design can be viewed as a vehicle for problem solving and help us navigate through uncertain times. And to quote the Sea Change Design Institute once more, design is the conscious planning and meaningful action that creates relationships with humanity, nature, spirit, and time. I'd like to end by briefly talking about X-Force, which is Orange Silicon Valley's corporate co-innovation program. If you're interested in the trends of Silicon Valley, or you're interested in partnering or investing in startups, we would like you to be part of our program. And if you're interested in finding out more, please feel free to reach out to my colleague, David Martin or Ellen Crown. Their emails are on the slide right there. And then with that, I'd like to give a special thank you to our guest speaker, Dr. Robin Beers, for sharing her insights and experiences with us all. And thank you to all of you who joined us for the live session today. We look forward to connecting with you in the future, and all our best to you as you navigate the next normal.
Thank you.
Thank you.